Grossman here for avshowrooms.com, and today we're going to be talking about the classic audio loudspeakers, the model T1.4 reference. These are big speakers with an intimate, smooth, and dynamic sound. I say this after devoting hundreds of hours listening to all types of music. It's also the reaction I've heard from many guests that have visited my listening room during the time the classic audio speakers have been here. The special design of the T1.4 speakers originate in the concepts of old-fashioned technology being executed with today's state-of-the-art drivers, mechanics, and cabinetry construction. They are bodacious and striking in their design, with big exposed drivers and impressive cabinetry. There isn't any way to hide the presence of these speakers in your living room. They will catch everyone's eye and make a visual statement that announces you are up to something serious with music reproduction. These horn drivers are powered with a field coil power supply, which is this box back here, which is set with variable levels. I've also used the Carver 180 Cherry tube amps. This is the GPI Traveler turntable. The phono stage is from Jolita. Preamp in the solid state is my Coil KPS 25S, which is also has a built-in CD. For a tube stage CD player, I use a Shanling T2000. And for the SET amplifier, integrated amplifier, we're using the Allnick T1500. And below that's my Magnum Dynalab tuner, useful for turning on the radio for background music. The cabling is by Joe Kubala, which is all this nice gray line called Fascination. And the racks are from Maple Shade, and other accessories also from Maple Shade with the brass counterweights. Let's speak about the background of the company, founded by John Wolfe. The background of the T.14 classic audio loudspeakers has a lot to do with history and understanding the technology of how speakers were designed in the early days of audio. These speakers are modern designs based upon historic engineering practices. They aren't simply a reproduction of an old speaker model. The early days of music production was accomplished with tube design amplifiers and efficient horn type of speakers. Horns are a natural way of enhancing efficiency and increasing the sound volume. Musical instruments have horns to project, color, and control their sounds. Beethoven used an ear trumpet to direct the sound into his head because he had hearing problems. Early Victrola players had a horn directly attached to amplify and resonate the sound coming from the needle. Think how often people cup their hands in their mouth when shouting directions to allow the voices to be heard better. So the physical shape and form of drivers also influence their sound along with the way they are mounted in cabinets. Now, back in the early days of audio, big cabinets with efficient speakers were the norm. It was a way of accommodating the lower output of these early types of tube amplifiers. Today, companies can build big, heavy, powerful multiple tube amps with high output ratings. But in the old days, more modest output tube amplifiers were featured, including designs that featured the single-ended triode, or SET. A set amp might only have the output of 3 to 15 watts, almost laughable compared to a modern solid-state amp. And now they're actually 100 years old. Yet their sound with high-efficient speakers has a special, palpable quality that has to be heard and experienced to truly understand the meaning of audio magic and musical involvement with the recording. Unlike today's marketplace, where people have to choose between digital formats and records, along with solid state or tube gear, only tube amps, records, and later on tape was available. The transistor had to wait until the 1950s to be invented and introduced to amplifier design. My 86-year-old mom reminisces about her family sitting around the radio, listening to music and being able to hear the latest news and all kinds of entertainment. Radio was a revelation and wonder in the era before TV. It was another world and a way of living before today's computers and the internet. This was also an era of mono sound, so people only looked at one lovely wood cabinet that was part of the decor and home furnishings. These early radios eventually evolved into having a separate big speaker and components, or a large console type of music cabinet system that housed everything. My dad was an early era audio type of guy that assembled his own hi-fi from a Fisher tuner, Brevard turntable, and a homemade tube amp. I remembered a big mahogany cabinet with some huge driver on the side. The classic audio T1.4 speakers, along with their Hartsfield speaker line, might qualify as the ultimate retro speakers to buy today. But these aren't going to be like finding an antique or pulling your grandfather's speaker out of the attic, because they are thoroughly contemporary in their parts and manufacture. They are built with attention to quality materials, strong cabinetry, and modern drivers. One of the early technologies utilized by the T1.4 speaker is a field coil driver design. Field coils were the ultimate way to wire a speaker to function before the days when exotic and strong magnetic materials were available. The field coils actually run with a separate DC power supply and has often been called the perfect magnet. The amount of current and voltage from this Mastech company DC power supply can be adjusted, and it will influence the sound. The T1 speakers exude many notable characteristics. They are definitely something special to hear, see, feel, and experience. They offer a large panoramic portrayal of the musical landscape. The sound isn't small and tight like the pinpoint imaging of a mini monitor. Yet the sound of the T1.4 doesn't seem bloated or exaggerated. It's just floating out there in the space in front of you, waiting to be heard. It can feel like opening a door and walking into a jazz club. The bass coming out of the two 15-inch drivers isn't especially fast, tight, or gut-punching like a servo-driven woofer. Nevertheless, a deep and full foundation to the music is always present and sensed. On most recordings, the bass is very relaxed and blended into the sound field. This works quite nicely for acoustical music. The mid-range has the dynamic range, speed, and sense of transparency to present a level of resolution that can be stunning. The sound of Miles Davis is real and distinct from the sound of Thad Jones or Wallace Roney. Chet Baker recordings rarely sounded better. The nuances and timbre of each musician's style and playing can be easily heard and understood. The sense of detail is never too much or fatiguing to hear. It's actually very realistic to the way I hear things when listening to live music. One day, I happened to have a reference recording of the Chicago Winds playing when the bass clarinetist of the Philadelphia Orchestra came over to pick up some music. Paul came into my living room unaware of what was being played. He didn't recognize the piece or know the recording, and asked what it was. He knows I'm always have different equipment over here being reviewed. But before I had a chance to answer him, suddenly after listening for just a few more moments, he asked, "Is that John Ye playing the clarinet?" John Ye's a clarinetist with Chicago, and he recognized the sound of his teacher. So that's one of the qualities of these speakers, just the refinement, the ability for them to really express and recreate the finest nuances and sounds of any singer, performer, musician. Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Shirley Horn, they all come back to life again. Mr. B, Billy Eckstine, swinging, Jimmy Rushing shouts his blues with gusto. These speakers have been a stimulus for me to go beyond my usual collection of recordings and start buying LPs and CDs. I have so much recordings here. Who thought I needed more? But they've provided so much interesting revelation into the singers and performers. And I want to hear more of their recordings. Even their lesser known or popular recording are worth hearing, because the classic speakers do such a great job of making music enjoyable. Orchestra recordings can have a presentation as if I'm sitting in the balcony. The sound isn't as if I'm in the front row or walking around on stage at work, as I've experienced with other speakers. It's a very relaxed and smooth soundstage that is deep and wide. Of course, so much depends on the recording engineer, and these speakers aren't going to dazzle you with tricky details. What they will do is present everything in a very clear way and allow the music to be very emotionally involving. I was at all the concerts and recording sessions for Yannick's new Stravinsky La Sopra recording that we made for Deutsche Grammophon. Will these speakers make anyone think they're listening live to the Philadelphia Orchestra of Horizon Hall? Of course not. How can anyone suspend reality in that way? What these speakers will do is reveal all the nuances of the performance with so much timbre, accuracy and space that I could become deeply emotionally involved with the music. I can forget that I'm listening to a bunch of electronics and stereo hardware and simply enjoy the music in the same way that I walk around at work and hear live music. I can hear and recognize the actual sound of the players as I hear them. They distinguish each of their voices, all within that sound field. Overall, the majority of times the sound is quite good, even with less well-made recordings. These are great speakers for putting on LPs and enjoying the music in style. Many recordings that I previously thought sounded average actually sound good with the T1.4 speakers, and some great recordings can sound even more amazing. These are speakers that can totally immerse a person in the performance. I've had experiences at late night listening sessions where the involvement with the music transformed time and location into a dreamlike state. It's an exciting treat to hear recordings portrayed with so much quality that it feels like I'm in a time machine going back to those special club dates and recording sessions. What more could I ask a speaker to do? They get my endorsement, and I encourage everyone to have a listen to them.